Nyalche Chembur Toto Ningmi Chang, Donen Manam Chembur, Nyalche Dankara Dargam Santo, Shermar, Tumba Turje Chan La Ki Shom Sar, Nishan Roar Zer Nishan Gamsa, Jawar Tuji Shan Yelaman, Jimmy Panzo Jala, Soran. Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Okay, let's continue our study of the Shurangama Sutra. The Shurangama Sutra is currently examining the cause of deluded thoughts. You all probably understood yesterday's content. It turns out the cause of deluded thoughts is ignorance, and the cause of ignorance is nothing at all. It is merely an accidental mad cause. Understanding it this way, we will continue today. Thus, someone who has become fully enlightened is like one who relates the events of a dream from which he has just awakened. His mind is now sharp and clear. What reason could he have then to wish to try to return to his dream to obtain some object that he had dreamt of? Here it says, attaining the supreme perfect fruition of Bodhi is just like this. How is it the same? It is like waking up from a dream after sleeping. Like one who has just awakened, this person who has woken up from a dream, if they were to talk about their entire experience in the dream, the things that happened in the dream, even though his mind is very sharp and he is a very wise and acute person, if you asked him to make everything from the dream happen, or asked him to explain, what reason could he have then to wish to try to return to his dream to obtain some object that he had dreamt of? He might think, relying on what kind of causes and conditions could all the objects and events that happened in the dream be displayed right before your eyes. That would be very difficult. Actually, everyone knows we also frequently dream. But as for dreams, after you wake up, you know it was a cause of confusion, and the causes preceding this cause of confusion, the process and the various results that finally appeared. If you were asked to display them one by one, at most, you could probably just describe them roughly with words. Other than that, there is no way to make people truly see the causes and conditions of the dream like this. If you were to explain this to an awakened person, you certainly couldn't point them out. Even less could delusion have any basis. Fundamentally, delusion has no existence. Furthermore, if things in a dream are like this, then even less could fundamental deluded thoughts have a cause. You see, you can't even fully explain the things in a dream to others. By the same reasoning, the cause of our deluded thoughts, as mentioned earlier, is like having no cause at all. Moreover, these deluded thoughts themselves do not contain anything real. Just like the hair of a tortoise or the horns of a rabbit, how could you display them in front of others? It's completely impossible. There is no such thing. So, by understanding through dreams, we see that the true nature of all dharmas is indeed completely unobtainable. Like Yajnadatta in that city, was there any reason for him to run madly about out of fear for his head? Just as we discussed earlier, Yajnadatta of Shravasti, Yajnadatta, everyone should remember this. In the future, if someone asks about ignorance, you can immediately say, in the Shurangama Sutra there is a person named Yajnadatta. In Tibetan it is Anzidade. It seems his parents were in an ancestral shrine praying in a sacrificial hall. After praying, this person was born. That's the kind of person he was. Therefore his name means born of the shrine, just like we talked about yesterday at that time, Yajnadatta. This news that happened in the city about Yajnadatta, did he really have any true cause and condition, any substantial cause and condition, to think his own head was missing, to become afraid and run away madly? This is explained in the parable. Because this person felt his head was missing and was extremely worried, he went mad and ran off. Were his madness to suddenly cease, it would not be because he had recovered his head from anywhere outside of himself.
Later, as he kept walking, perhaps without even knowing it, quite bafflingly, his mad mind, this frantic, insane mind of his, suddenly disappeared. Perhaps some mentally abnormal people are like this too. They might go completely insane, but suddenly they snap out of it. Ah, what was I thinking? Oh, where was I just now? Oh, I see. It's as if they've returned to normal. There are cases like this. Even the most deranged people in the world can suddenly and inexplicably, as if without cause or condition, have their madness cease. At this moment, does it mean his head has returned from somewhere else? No, it doesn't. Originally, his head was never severed, nor was it ever lost. When his mind became normal, did his head come back? And when his mind was abnormal, was his head really stolen by a demon? Of course not. That didn't happen. Thus it says here, how could his head have actually been missing, even while he was still in his madness? Even if his madness had not ceased, when his insane mind had not yet stopped, actually, at that time, how could he have lost his head? He hadn't lost it. Just now, while he was acting insanely, his head was perfectly intact. And just now, when his insane mind had already ceased, his head was still there. His head was like this before, and it is like this after. Therefore, this news story, the Buddha explained it very well. Wise people explain everything in great detail. Sometimes I think after studying the Shurangama Sutra, many of us probably feel that our greatly compassionate Buddha, compared to the founders of many other religions, setting aside our profound teachings on future lives or other aspects, just in terms of his eloquence and wisdom in analyzing problems, is truly very different. Studying the Shurangama Sutra, it has been over 40 classes now. During this process, every day we are made to try our utmost to focus on his wisdom, and that is just one sutra. The Buddha gave so many sutras. The profound spirit within just one sutra is truly hard to imagine. If we think the Buddha was just an ordinary worldly person, if he were an ordinary worldly person, how could he have composed so many teachings in one lifetime? And among all these many teachings, each one holds such profound meaning. Over the past few years, we have studied so many sutras, including the Lotus Sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, and the Dharma Flower Sutra. The Lotus Sutra and the Dharma Flower Sutra are the same. The Diamond Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Medicine Buddha Sutra, the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch was not spoken by the Buddha. What else? What else is there? I already mentioned the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Infinite Life Sutra, the Contemplation Sutra, and so on. We have studied far too little. You see, the Tripitaka is so vast. Sometimes looking at the Tibetan Tripitaka or the Chanlong Tripitaka, they are so massive. What we have studied is only 1%. Maybe we have studied about 1%. For example, the Tibetan canon has 108 volumes. We probably haven't even, definitely not 8 volumes. We've probably studied about 4 or 5 volumes. And yet, among us Buddhists, we are considered to be constantly engaging in listening and contemplating. Look at the Shurangama Sutra now. I don't know if anyone else is teaching it right now. So truly we might, comparatively speaking, among Buddhists today, we might not have studied an exceptionally large number of sutras, but we are doing decently. Still, what we have studied is very limited. Look at the Buddha's teachings. Originally, I wanted to read through the entire Tripitaka once, but it might be impossible in this brief human life. Just reading through the Tripitaka once would be excellent. In a lifetime, I dare not say study it all thoroughly, but just reading it once carries great blessings. I just mentioned Yajnadatta. The Buddha is continuing to analyze his story. The Buddha tells Purna, the same is true of the essential nature of delusion. Where could its basis lie? By the same reasoning, as for the deluded nature, earlier, when Yajnadatta ran out, it was because he felt he had no head and ran off in madness. If that is the case, we sentient beings are also drifting and suffering. Right at this moment, actually, we are driven by our deluded nature. We are drifting due to our deluded nature. Drifting due to this deluded nature, then where is its basis? Where is its cause? Just now, when he went out, he ran off thinking he had no head, but his head had never changed at all. We sentient beings are also lost in confusion within samsara. So what is our cause? It is said to be ignorance. But where is this ignorance? The essential nature of ignorance is also non-existent. Earlier, thinking the head was missing. This is a phenomenon of foolishness. We believe that all worldly dharmas exist and so on. This is also a kind of foolishness, a kind of ignorance. Therefore, the cause of ignorance is quite easy to look for in this way. All that is needed is for you not to follow after the distinctions you make concerning the perpetuations, the world, karma and retribution, and sentient beings. Once you have eliminated the three conditions that are necessary for the coming into being of these three perpetuations, their three causes will not become active again. Next, the Buddha tells Venerable Purna, if you do not follow the distinction-making of the world, the three perpetuations we discussed earlier. One is the material world, one is karma and retribution, and the other is the world of sentient beings. So, regarding these three perpetuations, if our minds do not follow the karmic distinction of the world, distinction of karma and retribution, and distinction of sentient beings, these three perpetuations, if we do not make such distinctions, then these three conditions are already severed. Truly not grasping at the material world, the sentient world, or karmic retribution, if we completely stop clinging and attaching to them, then these three conditions are already severed. These three conditions, as explained in some commentaries, refer to the previously mentioned world, karma and retribution, and sentient beings. There are also those we discussed earlier, the three conditions of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. If these three are severed, their three causes will not arise, because if these three are absent, these three causes will not be produced. If there is no source, how can they be produced? If attachment to these three conditions, whether it be killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, or attachment to these three types of clinging, is absent, then the perpetuations of the sentient world, material world, and karmic retribution will not be produced. Thus, the madness in your mind that is like Yajnadatta's madness will cease of its own accord, and just that ceasing is enlightenment. Generally, many of us know this phrase, the madness will cease of its own accord, and just that ceasing is enlightenment. This is something everyone is particularly, it should be considered quite famous. Whenever people want to quote a scriptural evidence from the Shurangama Sutra, many people will probably quote this one. But what does this actually originate from? It is saying, Venerable Purna, the madness in your mind, like Yajnadatta in the city we discussed earlier. As for Yajnadatta, actually, his madness ceased of its own accord. When the madness ceases of its own accord, actually, that very ceasing is Bodhi. So, the meaning of this sentence is that earlier, Yajnadatta first had a misunderstanding, because he looked in the mirror and in a groggy state thought he had lost his head and ran away. After running, fortunately, he recovered a while later. After recovering, nothing had actually happened. Actually, it is the same for us sentient beings attaining fruition. We believe we have a deluded mind. Ultimately, it naturally recognizes itself. Once it recognizes this, Bodhi is already attained. However, here, this is generally, in the Sutrayana, a very profound sentence. Its meaning is that our conceptual thoughts naturally cease, and this ceased part, the part that has stopped and extinguished, is Bodhi. If we explain it in simple terms, when our conceptual thoughts are naturally extinguished, the moment they are extinguished is Bodhi. It seems as if we first extinguish conceptual thoughts, our impure mind, and at the very moment it is extinguished, we attain Bodhi. On the surface, it seems there is a chronological sequence. First there is madness, then the madness stops, and the part that has stopped is Bodhi. Just like in the Four Noble Truths, relying on the truth of the path extinguishes afflictions. When afflictions are extinguished, the true reality manifests. It is this kind of idea. Of course, if we speak according to Dzogchen, exactly when all kinds of madness are arising, if you recognize its essence right in that moment, that is Bodhi. There is a slight, perhaps a difference between the Sutrayana and Tantric teachings, a slight difference. The Sutrayana generally states that when afflictions are extinguished, Bodhi manifests. There is such a process. In the Tantric teachings, afflictions are Bodhi. Whether the madness ceases or whether the madness is currently arising, actually, it is Bodhi. The ceasing here might mean stopping, or it might carry the meaning of recognizing. If you recognize this mad mind, oh, at that time, originally you felt, this is a deluded mind, I have gone mad. At this point it seems to have become normal. The moment it is recognized, at that moment it is already Bodhi. Therefore, when we recognize the mind, it's slightly different from the Tantric explanation. In our treasury of the Dharmadhatu, and also in the flight of the Garuda, it says that the very essence of this clear and lucid mind right now, unaltered and unfeigned, is exactly Bodhi. This is what it means. Therefore, if you cannot memorize the Shurangama Sutra, the madness will cease of its own accord, and that ceasing itself is full awakening. Just this is enough. If someone asks you a question, just say this sentence and say no more. If it's really the case, especially if the question asked is quite profound and you don't quite know how to answer it, just keep staring into space, saying nothing at all, just like this. Ah, the madness will cease of its own accord, and that ceasing itself is full awakening. Okay, the answer is complete. The other person might even become enlightened, who knows? That supreme, pure, luminous mind that understands has always extended everywhere throughout the Dharma realm. It cannot be bestowed upon you by someone else. Just as mentioned earlier, this supreme, pure and luminous nature of the Tathagata Garbha has inherently extended everywhere throughout the entire Dharmadhatu. It is absolutely not obtained from anyone else. Of course, in terms of manifestation, it might be due to the direct pointing out instructions of another master or the direct pointing of the Buddha that it manifests. But in reality, it is not that there is truly something you obtain. For example, the Yajnadatta we just mentioned. While Yajnadatta was running madly outside, if someone said to him, "Where are you going?" "I am afraid that I don't have a head." Then the person looks and says, "You do have a head." "Oh, I have a head." But at that time, is it the case that that person gave him a head? Actually, they did not give him a head. By the same reasoning regarding our original mind, we do not recognize it ourselves and have been constantly in confusion. The Master uses pith instructions to directly point it out to you. When it is pointed out, you recognize it. When you recognize it at this time, it is not that you have obtained the luminous mind of the Tathagata Garbha. It is just that you were mistaken previously. And then this mistake is corrected for you. That is all. Aside from this, the Master did not, just as that person did not take a head and place it on you because you lacked one. It is not like that. Luminosity is not given to you by the Master. It is just that when you were in a state of confusion, relying on an external condition or cause, which can also be called the Master's kindness, what need is there to work yourself to the bone in pursuit of awakening? On what grounds should we use hard work or toil, usually referring to muscles, sinews and joints, meaning to exert the greatest effort to diligently practice and realize it? Originally, one already has all these merits perfected within oneself. In the Tibetan translation it says, "Why should the body and mind labor bitterly in hopes of practice and realization?" This means that since it is inherently complete within oneself, since the inherent nature is already complete, why is there a need to undergo ascetic practices, to endure all sorts of torment, and to attain realization? Practice is non-practice, non-practice is practice. Within this original state, when you observe inwardly, it is merely recognizing it. Actually, this analogy we just discussed is truly excellent. Yajnadatta never lost anything at all. It's just that he suddenly had a slight problem. Actually, we sentient beings are just like this. The true nature of each one of us has never been lost. It is just that in the interim, due to the cause of ignorant madness, we fail to recognize it and lose our direction, that's all. However, regarding this being lost, for some, it is an extremely long time, lasting countless eons. For some, it is a relatively short time. This depends on one's own karmic connections. Next, it shares a parable. Consider, for example, a person who does not know that a wish-fulfilling pearl is sewn into his coat. Destitute and homeless, wandering from place to place as he begs for his food, there was a person who, within his own clothing, wrapped up a wish-fulfilling jewel. He used his own clothes to wrap it up. But perhaps he was a bit foolish or something. He was unaware of it and forgot. Sometimes we ourselves place things somewhere and completely forget what they are. This person was very poor. He suffered greatly, sleeping outdoors in other places. He also begged for food, rushing about everywhere, enduring constant hardships and difficulties, constantly rushing about in pain. This seems quite foolish. Actually, every one of us sentient beings is just like this. We take the wish-fulfilling jewel of our true nature and wrap it in clothes like dark clouds. And then, bound by all kinds of attachments, we are unaware of it. Furthermore, in the wilderness of samsara, we continuously rush about. It is always like this. He is indeed poor, but his wish-fulfilling pearl is still with him. Although this person appeared to be truly very destitute, poor and impoverished, this awakened nature, like the wish-fulfilling jewel, has never been lost. In Master Changshui Zixuan's commentary, it says, "Though remaining in birth and death, the awakened nature is ever present. Although flowing in the cycle of birth and death, the awakened nature is ever present. As for awakened nature, this is the awakened nature we frequently use in tantric teachings. In the Sutrayana, sometimes the Bodhi mind is called the awakened wondrous mind. Sometimes it is the wondrous luminous mind. But Changshui calls it the ever-present awakened nature here. Awakened nature. Remember this. I used to think awakened nature is a quite good translation. I have always felt that our luminous mind, the recognized luminous mind, is called the awakened nature. In Tibetan, it is Rigpa. But generally, in the Sutrayana, the term awakened nature is used a bit less frequently. Actually, it refers to the luminous mind of our Tathagata Garbha, this recognized mind. Generally, when it is not recognized, it is not called awakened nature, because one is not yet awakened. If it is recognized, this is called the awakened nature. The awakened nature has never been lost or ruined. That poor person just mentioned, there was always a wish-fulfilling jewel inside his clothes, a very, very small wish-fulfilling jewel, kept in his clothes as he went everywhere begging. Only later did he realize, oh, what is in my bag? It turns out to be below. There is someone who points it out to him directly. Then it so happens that someone wise points out his pearl to him, and now it can fulfill his every wish. He becomes very rich. Later, he suddenly met a wise person. With one look, he knew that a wish-fulfilling jewel was actually wrapped in his clothes. Then he said with good intentions, "How could you be like this? You are sleeping outdoors in such suffering. But actually you possess a wish-fulfilling jewel." Then he looked for himself, and indeed it was so. He could then use it however he wished, and all his wishes were fulfilled. Finally, he became an extraordinarily great, wealthy person. At this time, everyone respected him greatly. Generally, when one has ability, wisdom, and wealth, everyone respects them. If this person is poor, no one pays attention to him. Therefore, in our Tibetan region, there is a saying, with money, you are the uncle's nephew. Without money, you are the uncle's servant. If a wealthy person has an uncle, the uncle will say, you are my nephew, very good. If this person has no money, then the uncle will just treat him as a servant. So generally capable people, everyone finds them agreeable, everyone likes them. If one has neither wisdom nor wealth, if one has nothing at all, no one pays them any attention. So just now, when he was outside begging, probably no one paid him any mind. Suddenly he got the wish-fulfilling jewel, and if he became rich, wow, then everyone would want to take him as their own follower or family. And he realizes that his magical pearl can only have come from within himself. Only at this time did he discover his wish-fulfilling jewel. But this wish-fulfilling jewel was not brought from somewhere else. It must have been on him all along, inside his clothes. At this time you see Ananda comes out now. Still, great minds think alike. Ananda, you're here. We haven't seen you for a few days. Then Ananda came forward from his place in the great assembly to bow at the Buddha's feet. He stood and said to the Buddha, Ananda came out. Ananda is very respectful. Did Purna bow the other day? In the great assembly he bowed at the Buddha's feet. World-honored one, you have just now been saying that once we put to rest the karmas of killing, stealing, and sexual desire, so that these three conditions no longer arise, their three causes will not become active again. Then the madness in our minds that is like Yajnadatta's madness will cease of its own accord, and that ceasing itself is full awakening, which no one else can bestow upon us. Then he started asking questions again. Buddha, didn't you just say that regarding the karmas of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, because the three conditions are severed, the three causes do not arise? And that the Yajnadatta in our minds, the madness will cease of its own accord, and that ceasing itself is full awakening, which no one else can bestow upon us. Actually, our minds attain Bodhi naturally. It is not produced by relying on other causes and conditions. What Ananda mainly wanted to ask, he repeats the Buddha's words here, didn't you just say that because the three conditions are severed, it is not produced by causes and conditions, not produced by causes? Generally, Arhats place great importance on causes and conditions. All dharmas arise from causes and conditions. The Thus Come One has explained their causes. All dharmas cease due to causes and conditions. This is what the great Shramana proclaims. This is the mantra of dependent origination. It is also explained very clearly in the treatise on entering the Mahayana. All dharmas are produced relying on dependent origination. Furthermore, many arhats attained realization through dependent origination and emptiness of nature. In this case, he felt that the madness ceases, and that ceasing is awakening seems like a kind of spontaneous arising, which is not very good. Isn't all this clearly an example of the working of causes and conditions? Although these causes and conditions are explained quite clearly, why then does the Thus Come One now reject the doctrine of causes and conditions? We all clearly know that this is produced by causes and conditions. But why does the Thus Come One say to suddenly reject all arising from causes and conditions? If that is the case, he says, I don't quite accept it. Why doesn't he quite accept it? World-honored one, it was through hearing about causes and conditions that I became enlightened. Although Ananda was a stream enterer, and his level of realization wasn't very high actually, when the thus come one spoke the Dharma of causes and conditions at that time, because wasn't it mentioned earlier at that time Ananda, when teaching the Shurangama Sutra, hadn't he become enlightened? He reached the first fruition. I became enlightened because you spoke the Dharma of causes and conditions at that time. My mind attained awakening. As did others of us younger hearers of the teaching who still need instruction. Here also in this assembly now are Mahamudgalyayana, Sariputra, Subhuti, and others, who once followed Brahmin elders. They too heard the teaching about causes and conditions, and as a result they made the resolve to enter the monastic life. They put an end to their outflows and became enlightened. He said, "It's not just me, a little novice monk, the young hearer Ananda. It's not just me alone. We younger generations of novice monks, we arose relying on causes and conditions. Moreover, seated here today in this great Shurangama assembly, those extraordinary elders such as Mahamudgalyayana, Sariputra, Subhuti, and so on, who once followed Brahmin elders. They too heard the teaching about causes and conditions, and as a result they made the resolve to enter the monastic life. As for them, in the Tibetan translation, these and others, these older Brahmin ascetics, also heard the Buddha's teaching on causes and conditions and became enlightened, ultimately attaining the state without outflows. This is one method of explanation. There's another explanation. It seems Master Changshui Zixuan and the commentary pointing to the palm of the Shurangama Sutra also have some differences. Their ways of explaining are also different. In Tibetan, it is these old Brahmins and others. Probably Subhuti, Sariputra, Maudgalyayana were all old Brahmins previously. Actually, the old Brahmins were also like this. There is another explanation. These people and others initially heard it from the old Brahmins and later heard of causes and conditions from the Buddha and became enlightened. Perhaps this way is a bit better because of from old Brahmins, from anyway, the Tibetan translation and Changshui Zixuan are quite similar. In the commentary pointing to the palm of the Shurangama Sutra, it was previously, because these Arhats had previously attained the path before some Brahmins. Later they heard the Buddha's teaching on causes and conditions and finally became enlightened, attaining the Arhat fruition, the fruition without outflows. Now you say that one does not after all realize enlightenment through causes and conditions. Didn't you just say today that Bodhi has no cause, that ignorance doesn't exist, that there is no cause? Then this Bodhi you speak of today does not come from causes and conditions. If that is so, the ultimate truth must be what Maskari Gosaliputra and those others in Rajagara teach, that enlightenment happens on its own. If today you say it is not produced by causes and conditions, then in the city of Rajagara there is a non-Buddhist named Maskari Gosaliputra. Maskari Gosaliputra also said that it is accomplished naturally. He said over 80,000 eons, if a person just stays naturally, ultimately they will naturally attain accomplishment. For example, if a ball of thread is placed here, it just keeps rolling and rolling and eventually stops on its own. When a person reaches a certain time, after 80,000 eons, they naturally attain accomplishment. So if it is not causes and conditions, we Arhats were all enlightened, relying on causes and conditions. But Buddha, today you say that this is not produced by causes and conditions. Then your view and the view of the non-Buddhists in Rajagara have no difference at all. He really dares to ask and speak out. I only hope that now the Buddha will compassionately clear up the confusion which has been suffocating us. We can only beseech the greatly compassionate Buddha. You must clear up our confused, suffocated minds. You must turn the wheel of Dharma for us. He spoke very forcefully, saying, You are no different from the non-Buddhists. But then again, some of us are like this too, speaking very forcefully in front of certain people and finally using more tactful language. Then please give us your teaching. We think your view is exactly the same as so-and-so's, completely identical. But we still request you to compassionately instruct us. Ananda is now becoming less and less afraid of the Buddha. He says your view and the view of the non-Buddhists in Rajagra are exactly the same, but he still asks for a compassionate explanation. Then the Buddha begins to tell him. How does he say it? The Buddha said to Ananda, "Let us compare what you have said to the case of Yajnadatta in Sravasti. If the causes and conditions for his madness were to disappear, his sanity would naturally reappear on its own. Your argument concerning causes and conditions and things coming into being on their own amounts to nothing more than that." Next, the Buddha debates with Ananda. "Let's see if I am the same as the non-Buddhists, or if you are the same as the non-Buddhists. Come here, just come here. Ananda, you come here. You come here, you come here." Ananda is quite pitiful sometimes. Sometimes the Buddha scolds him very severely. Sometimes it's others, like Matangi, who also treated him very badly. Then he says, "Ananda, Yajnadatta in our city. As for Yajnadatta, indeed he went mad for a period. His mind was abnormal for a period of time. He even went to a mental hospital, but later he came back. He came back and now he is normal. He says that is the cause and condition of his madness. Wasn't he just acting madly? If these causes and conditions are eliminated." Because for a period of time his mind was indeed frustrated and confused, and he ran madly outside. Finally, when the causes and conditions of this madness have been eliminated, if they are eliminated, his sanity would naturally reappear on its own. At this time, is it not that his sanity, his non-madness, naturally appears? Because Ananda feels that arising from causes and conditions is acceptable, but arising spontaneously on its own is unreasonable. If the madness ceases of its own accord, and that ceasing itself is full awakening, this is a kind of natural arising. He thinks it is like this, but the Buddha asks here, if the madness is extinguished, does the sane nature naturally appear? If you say yes, actually, your argument concerning causes and conditions and things coming into being on their own amounts to nothing more than that. Actually, the dharmas of causes and conditions and natural spontaneity are merely this. You say the madness has been extinguished. If the madness has been extinguished, then in reality, his mind was originally like this. Other than this, we do not acknowledge a permanent dharma of natural spontaneity. It is completely different from the non-Buddhists. It is just that his madness has been extinguished, naturally returning to his original state. He went mad in the middle and later became normal again. When he is normal, he is still a normal person. But if you say that as long as he is normal, there is no difference from the non-Buddhists, that is not what it means. Actually, the extinguishing of madness is called the dharma of causes and conditions. The natural appearance of the true nature is called, you can also call it a kind of spontaneity. Or you can say that ceasing is awakening. It means the same thing. The Buddha tells Ananda again, Yajnadatta, his head was just as it always was. It was already fundamentally part of him. Otherwise he would not have been who he was. Indeed, this Shurangama Sutra sometimes is quite... Wasn't there a PhD the other day who understood it all in one night? I was a bit skeptical. He probably couldn't understand it. He took one night. We have spent so many days having to read for a very long time, roughly skimming the commentaries and contemplating before we can understand. I don't know about him. If he really understood it, when I meet him, I need to ask him, let him explain a few terms from here to see if he has really understood. He says about Yajnadatta, the Buddha tells Ananda, Yajnadatta, his head was originally naturally there, already complete. It was already fundamentally part of him. Originally, this head had never been lost. It was always complete. Otherwise, he would not have been who he was. As for this, there was never a time when his head did not exist. Regarding Yajnadatta, whether he was running madly or looking in the mirror, or when he finally returned, his original head was always there. It was always on his body. It never happened that his head was missing in the middle and then came back later. There was no such process. How then could causes and conditions be involved in his running madly about out of fear that his face had disappeared? Due to what causes and conditions? Because he was afraid he had lost his own head and then started running madly. Due to what causes and conditions is this? If you really feel you need to find a cause and condition, because his head was always there. If it wasn't there, there would be a cause and condition. Just like sometimes we lose a yak from the herd. The yak is indeed missing. Then I feel very upset and go everywhere looking for it. In the end, if I find it somewhere, it is true that the yak was missing from the herd at that time. My searching is justified because it was missing at that time. It seems in one of the Madhyamaka texts it says, the loss of our mind is not like losing a yak. If you lose a yak, it is indeed lost in the process and then eventually found. But the loss of our mind is not like this. It was originally never lost. Therefore he asks, what cause and condition do you have to say the head is missing and then run madly? His head was intact from the beginning, but if his madness were indeed due to causes and conditions, he says, if our head is naturally already complete, but because of the condition of looking in the mirror, the mind becomes terrified and mad. The head is already there, but because of the condition of looking in the mirror, he suddenly feels it is not there. So my mind generates madness. It is like a question. My head naturally exists, but because I looked in the mirror and felt it was missing. If it is missing due to this condition, my mind is terrified and mad. Originally, it is also like this. The head is already there, but after he looked in the mirror, for some unknown reason, he didn't see it. When he didn't see it, he started to become afraid. Actually, for some of us, including when we argue or when we have a little fear in our hearts, has a demon come? Or could it be that I have lost the person dearest to me? Suddenly there is a mad, frantic feeling in the mind. Then the more nervous we get, the more serious we feel the matter is. Actually, it is something that has never happened. Sometimes we have such madness if you think it was originally there, but because of such causes and conditions, my mind becomes mad. Wouldn't causes and conditions have also led to his head actually disappearing? Conversely, why not rely on causes and conditions to discard the natural state? Or to put it another way, why not, because of the natural state, discard causes and conditions? Because your head exists naturally. If that is the case, why do you not discard causes and conditions because of the natural state? Earlier it was said the natural state was there, but due to causes and conditions there is madness. If one becomes mad due to causes and conditions, then conversely we say, why is it that because of the natural state already exists? This is real. Because of this reason, that sudden mad cause and condition just now, why is it not discarded? Perhaps it is better to explain it this way, although some commentaries have different ways of explaining it. Yet his head has always been present. His madness and terror arose from delusion. No actual change had taken place. How then could his madness have arisen from causes and conditions? Originally his head was never lost. It is just that because madness arose, ultimately deluded thoughts appeared. But throughout the entire process of these deluded thoughts appearing, there was never any change. His head was always exactly the same as before and exactly the same after. Actually, this parable is quite excellent. It contains many profound meanings. Ordinarily, we do not recognize our own minds. We rarely analyze it theoretically like this. So we must always keep Yajnadatta. In the future, every one of you should make friends with Yajnadatta, okay? How was he? In this way, regarding your entire recognition of true nature, there really will be a great difference. What were the causes and conditions for Yajnadatta at the beginning? How did he go out in the middle? Finally, how did he discover that he wasn't like that? During this process, how did the Buddha analyze it? How was his entire process analyzed? Actually, all these principles are of great relevance to the confused madness of us sentient beings. It is still very relevant. In the future, if some people wonder, where does ignorance come from? You should say, in the Shurangama Sutra, there is a story about a person named Yajnadatta. It should be fine to use this story to analyze it. In the past, when I went to schools, many people asked. When they asked, I would often say, sometimes it's like a cloud naturally appearing in the sky. Actually, this is also found in some Mahayana sutras. What is ignorance like? Ignorance actually has no true cause. A cloud suddenly appears in the sky. If you ask what the cause of the cloud is, it has no real cause. It suddenly appears. Because space is an unconditioned dharma. For an unconditioned dharma to produce a cause for a conditioned dharma, this is impossible to explain. But this can perhaps be explained from the perspective of the Uttara Tantra Shastra, the teachings of the third turning of the Dharma wheel. This is acceptable. So this should be an analogy that combines the second and third turnings of the Dharma wheel. Therefore, this Yajnadatta of ours is also a very good analogy regarding madness. It says here, the head was never lost. It was just that deluded thoughts appeared due to madness. During this process, it never changed at all. It did not change even the slightest bit. How then could his madness have arisen from causes and conditions? Through what causes and conditions did this appear? And if his madness were fundamentally part of him, if madness and terror were the way he was in the first place, if you think madness is a natural state, then this mad mind would have already been present originally. If you think madness originally appeared as a natural state, then in that case, isn't it true that such madness and terror were already present originally? It's not the true mind, but like the true nature of our mind, is there such a confused ignorance present? If that is the case, then why would his madness not have been already evident? If that is the case, then before he went mad, this mad mind should have been hidden somewhere, lurking in some place. But where is this? It is nowhere. If you think like this, then before Yajnadatta looked in the mirror, this mad nature of his should have been there when he woke up in the morning or when he slept at night, constantly waiting for an opportunity, constantly hiding beside his mind. Then when he looked in the mirror, it was making trouble on the side, having such a mad mind constantly following him. But this is completely out of the question. If there really were such a nature, is it inside or outside of his mind or somewhere else? Therefore, when we observe it this way, this madness, of course, when we study the Uttara Tantra Shastra, sometimes we can say the true nature is our original mind. But this ignorant mind, it also has a very long-lasting cause and condition. This can be acknowledged. But such causes and conditions are actually unreliable. So where does the madness hide? But if his madness was not fundamentally part of him, if he was not deluded about his head all along, why did he run madly about? Then if this non-madness is his natural state, and his head originally has no delusion, no falsity, if this is the case, why would he run madly, run about frantically? There's no reason to run. Had Yajnadatta awakened and realized that his head was fundamentally part of him, he would have understood that his running about was madness. If you think you originally had a head, but later you came to believe you had no head, and ran about in a frantic state of mind. If that were the case, actually, what you originally had is considered spontaneity, and the condition you later found to not exist is causes and conditions. From this, it should be clear to you that your objections about causes and conditions and about things coming into being on their own cannot be taken seriously. Actually, both of these are completely playful words, because Venerable Ananda, actually towards spontaneity, has always been quite repulsed by the non-Buddhists. And Venerable Purna, he felt that the dharma of causes and conditions is unreliable. Earlier, he always felt, how could ignorance be... Does it have a cause? Actually, the focus of their two questions is different. As stated in the commentary pointing to the palm of the Shurangama Sutra, one is more toward the dharma of spontaneity, because Ananda himself believes arising from causes and conditions is reasonable, but as for arising spontaneously, that has no difference from the non-Buddhists. Then Venerable Purna, he might be a bit similar to the Mahayana. He naturally understands that the inherent completeness of the nature of the mind is more reasonable. But arising from causes and conditions, no matter what, is unreasonable. Actually, at this time, on the surface, it looks like an answer to Ananda, but in reality, the Buddha is regarding Venerable Ananda and Venerable Purna, refuting both the dharmas of causes and conditions and spontaneity, acknowledged by these two at the same time. This means that a truly substantial dharma of causes and conditions is also unestablished. A truly substantial dharma of spontaneity is also unestablished. He merely uses this parable to illustrate it, just as we discussed earlier, the parable of Yajnadatta. In fact, when our mind recognizes it, all confusion instantly vanishes. Actually, recognizing it does not mean obtaining it anew. It is merely that his originally confused mind has already returned to normal, that's all. Whenever we become enlightened, we can give it another name. When will I recover? When will I become a normal person? We can put it this way. Every one of us sentient beings. It's just like Yajnadatta earlier. We are all running madly in samsara because out of fear we think we have no head and go mad. If we meet a wise master, he will say, "You never lost it. Look in the mirror yourself." But at that time, his madness is very intense. For a very long time, even though a wise person tells him, he might sometimes have habitual tendencies that are too severe. Just like some of our mentally abnormal people, no matter how you talk to them, there is no way, no matter how you treat them or give them medicine, because their habitual tendencies of confused phenomena are extremely deep. At this time, for him to suddenly have some medicine, or to understand it theoretically, is very difficult, but if the causes and conditions are truly complete, and he himself has faith, if all aspects of causes and conditions are complete, then perhaps he will recover normality in a very short time. Therefore, it is mentioned here, all dharmas of causes and conditions and spontaneity are mere playful words. Playful words, in Tibetan, are translated as words of dualistic play. But the playful words here can be understood as the mental fabrications in Madhyamaka as well. Actually, they are all a kind of play, a kind of game. The playful words here might mean whether you speak of causes and conditions or spontaneity, they are all non-substantial, merely a game, merely a play. That is probably the meaning. Okay, we will conclude today's teaching here.
Bandara